She came in alone. She didn't say a word about why she was there, but Daniel noticed something. The way she looked at the room, like she was seeing it for the last time. The restaurant was silent now, every table set perfectly, every glass polished until it caught the light like something alive. Daniel stood in the middle of it all and felt absolutely nothing. That was the problem. Not the silence, the nothing. He had been standing there for maybe 10 minutes when his phone buzzed. Another review. 4 stars out of 5. Exceptional food, cold atmosphere. He put the phone face down on the bar and stared at the ceiling. 4 stars. Always 4 stars. Never 5. Always exceptional food, followed by something colder. Efficient service. Professional staff. Well executed. Words that belonged on a report card, not on a review of a place where people came to celebrate the most important nights of their lives. Daniel had opened Maison 7 years ago. He had given everything to it. 16-hour days. Weekends gone. A relationship that ended because she said she was competing with the kitchen. And she was right. He had trained under 3 different masters in 3 different countries. He had chased every technique, every source, every standard. He had turned Mason into one of the most technically accomplished restaurants in the city. And people described it as cold. He picked up the phone again. He scrolled through review after review. They all said the same thing in different words. Technically flawless. Impeccably presented. Felt like eating in a museum. One person had written, and this sentence had followed Daniel for weeks. The food was the best I have ever eaten, but I do not think I will return. I cannot explain why. He turned off the phone and sat in the dark. He could not explain it either. But something in his chest told him the answer was there. In that quiet, in that nothing, and that he was getting very close to either finding it or losing everything. The truth arrived, as most important truths do, through a stranger. Her name, he later learned, was Clara. She came in on a Tuesday evening in October, one of those slow nights when the city breathes quietly and the dining room fills at half its usual pace. She was alone. That was not unusual. What was unusual was the way she looked at the room. Not the way most guests looked, scanning for a table, checking a phone, thinking about what to order. She looked at the dining room the way a person looks at something they are seeing for the last time. Daniel noticed this from across the room. Observation had always been his gift. He had trained himself to read a space the way a musician reads a score. Quickly, completely, with full attention. He noticed small things, always. But what he had been doing with those observations for 7 years was nothing. He asked Mia, his best server, steady and sharp and warm, about the reservation. Mia said the woman had booked online, alone, no special notes, just a name and a time. The meal began. Course after course moved out of the kitchen, perfectly timed. The team was running well that evening, everything in its place, everything correct. But midway through the 4th course, something shifted. Daniel was watching from the kitchen pass, the narrow opening between the kitchen and the dining room, where a chef can see everything without being seen. Clara had put down her fork. She was looking out at the street. She wasn't crying, she was just very, very still. Daniel stepped back from the pass and walked out to Mia. "The woman at table 4, he said quietly. "Do you know why she's here tonight?" Mia shook her head. "Ask her," Daniel said, gently, "when she finishes the course. Just ask if tonight is a special night." Mia looked at him. In 7 years, he had never done this. There was a rule in Maison, unwritten but absolute. You did not enter a guest's private world. You observed. You anticipated. You served. But you kept the professional distance. That clean, cool space between perfect service and actual human contact. Just ask, Daniel said again. A few minutes later, Mia came to the kitchen doorway. Around her, the cooks moved and called and pans rang against burners. She stood still in all of that noise and said very quietly, "It's her wedding anniversary. She and her husband came here every year. He died 6 months ago. This is her first time back." Something stopped inside Daniel's chest. He stood there for a moment. The kitchen went on around him, perfectly, just as he had built it to. And he thought, for the first time with sudden and painful clarity, about what he had actually built. He had built a machine, a beautiful, precise, technically extraordinary machine. It produced perfect food. It ran perfectly. And it felt, to the people who sat inside it, like nothing. He went to the pantry. He found a small white candle, the kind they used on the tables each evening. He found a card. He held the pen over it for a long time, thinking. Then he wrote 6 words. He would be proud you came back. He gave the candle and the card to Mia and said, "Before the final course. No ceremony. Just quietly, as if it is the most natural thing in the world." He watched from the kitchen pass as Mia set the candle on the table and placed the card beside Clara's glass. He watched as the woman read the words. He watched as she pressed the card flat against her chest and looked up at the ceiling, not holding something in but letting something go. She did not cry loudly. She made no scene. She sat there with her hand over her heart for a long moment, and then she smiled. That small, quiet smile broke something open in Daniel, because it was the first time in 7 full years that someone in his restaurant had looked like that. Not impressed, not pleased, not satisfied with the quality of the food or the precision of the service. Moved. He went back to his office after service and sat alone for a long time. Then he opened his laptop and searched for something he had read once, years ago, in a short article about a restaurant that had started from nothing and become, against all logic and probability, the best in the world. He had saved a single sentence from that article, the way you save a song you don't yet understand but can't stop thinking about. Service is a monologue, but hospitality is a conversation. He found the book that night. He ordered it. It arrived the next morning. He read it in 3 days, barely sleeping, marking pages until the margins were full. And what he found inside those pages changed the shape of everything. The book was about something its author called Unreasonable Hospitality. Not the ordinary kind, drama, the correct kind, the professional kind. The kind where you remember whether a guest prefers sparkling or still water. That was the baseline, the author wrote. That was the floor of the building, not the building itself. Unreasonable hospitality was something else entirely. It was the decision, made in a single moment, to give someone something they never asked for, never expected, and could never have imagined receiving. Not because a training manual said to, not because it would earn a better rating, but because you had truly seen this person, their real evening, their real story, their real need. And you chose freely to meet it. The author wrote about a moment in his own restaurant when he overheard a couple at a nearby table. They were visiting the city. It was their last evening. One of them mentioned quietly, almost as a joke, that they were sad they hadn't managed to try a proper street hot dog. That simple, cheap thing sold from a cart on the corner. A small, offhand wish. The kind of thing a person says and immediately forgets. The author didn't forget. He sent someone out immediately to get 2 hot dogs from the nearest street cart. They came back and were placed on a clean white plate, presented quietly between courses, as naturally as if it had been part of the menu all along. The couple's reaction was not just surprise, it was something beyond surprise. It was the feeling of having been heard, truly, completely heard, by someone who had no obligation to listen that carefully. Daniel read that story and sat back in his chair. He thought about the 7 years he had spent perfecting his craft. The sourcing, the technique, the training, the relentless pursuit of flawless execution. The book made clear that none of that was wrong. The author was not saying that excellence in craft was unnecessary. He was saying the opposite. The craft was the foundation, and without it, there was nothing to build on. You could not skip the hard years of mastering your skill. You could not shortcut the 10,000 hours of getting good. The foundation had to be real and it had to be deep. But the foundation was not the house. Excellence in craft was the price of entry. It was what gave you the right to be in the room. What you did with that right, how you used your skills to actually serve the living person sitting across from you, that was where the real work began. And Daniel had mastered the foundation completely and then stopped. He had never started the second part of the work. He called a meeting the next morning. 14 people in the dining room, morning light coming in long and low through the windows. He told them about Clara. He told them about the card and the candle and the 6 words and the smile. He watched their faces as he spoke. He saw something move through the room, a kind of recognition, the quiet look people get when they hear a truth they already knew but had never been given permission to say out loud. Then he told them the hot dog story. The room was very still when he finished. Service, he said, is what we do. Hospitality is how we make people feel. We have been doing one very well and completely neglecting the other. He paused. He looked at each of them in turn. I am not asking you to do less. I am asking you to do more. But a different kind of more. I want you to stop thinking about your own performance and start thinking about the person across from you. Not the customer, not the reservation, the actual human being who chose to spend a part of their one life sitting at one of our tables tonight. Find out who they are, what they need, what would make this evening something they carry with them. He called it reading the room at a deeper level, not noticing whether glasses were full, noticing the person, a birthday card half visible in a handbag, a couple who had barely spoken but kept moving their hands toward each other across the white tablecloth, a man who ordered a second dessert without looking at the menu, someone who needed comfort, not choices, a young woman dining alone who had dressed with great care and kept glancing at the door. Every person who walks through a door carries something invisible with them, Daniel told his team. Something that brought them here tonight instead of somewhere else. Our job is not just to feed them. Our job is to make them feel, for the time they are in this room, that someone in the world truly sees them. It sounds simple. It is not simple. It is one of the hardest things a person can do in any kind of work, to stop thinking about their own performance and start giving their full attention to the person in front of them. To care, not as a technique, not as a strategy, but as a genuine choice made in each moment of each evening. Thomas, the senior server who had worked with Daniel since the very beginning, pulled him aside after the meeting. "I am very good at this job," he said. There was no arrogance in it, only the quiet confidence of someone who had earned it honestly. "My timing is perfect. I know the menu deeply. I do not make mistakes. I take real pride in that." "What exactly are you asking me to change?" Daniel thought for a long moment. Then he said, "When was the last time a guest left and you felt something because of it?" Thomas was quiet. "That's all I'm asking you to change," Daniel said gently. "Not your skill, your heart." What happened next was harder to describe because it happened slowly, from the inside out, in the way that real change always happens. Daniel realized, as the weeks passed, that he was asking his team for something that required him to give them the same thing first. You cannot ask people to be generous beyond what is required without first being generous to them in that same way. You cannot ask your team to truly see the guests if you have never truly seen your team. Leadership without humanity is just management, and management, like service, is only a monologue. He started arriving earlier, not to do more work, to talk. Not about the restaurant, but about the people inside it. He learned things he was embarrassed to have not known. David, the youngest server, kept a small notebook in his jacket pocket where he wrote down story ideas. Thomas had a daughter who had just started walking and who he missed during the long evening shifts. Mia was quietly saving money for a journey she had dreamed about since she was 15 years old. And then, quietly, without announcement, Daniel started acting on what he had learned. He adjusted Thomas's schedule so he could be home on Tuesday mornings when his daughter was most awake and most wanting her father's company. He left a book on David's locker, a collection by a writer David had mentioned admiring once in passing, with no note attached. He wrote Mia a letter of recommendation for a travel scholarship she had mentioned once in a sentence and had never told him she was applying for. Small things. Unreasonable things. Things with no direct business value that a manager running purely on efficiency would never do. The effect on the team was not something Daniel had calculated, even though perhaps he should have seen it coming. When people feel truly seen by them, when someone gives them their full attention, their genuine interest, their unearned generosity, something unlocks inside them. Not just gratitude, though there was gratitude. Something deeper, a kind of permission. The permission to care beyond the boundary of what is required. Generosity is not just contagious, it is instructive. When someone shows you what it feels like to be seen, you begin looking at others differently. You start seeing the people around you the way you now know it is possible to be seen. Ask yourself this: when was the last time someone gave you something you didn't ask for? Not a gift, not money, but a moment of pure, undivided attention. And how long did you carry that with you? A month after the staff meeting, David came to Daniel before service. He was nervous, which was unusual for him. He had a couple coming in that evening for their 20th wedding anniversary. He had looked up the reservation and spent 2 evenings doing research, searching old food blogs, archived websites, scanned menus from restaurants that no longer existed. And he had found the name of the place where this couple had their very first date, 22 years ago. That restaurant was long gone, but David had found its original menu, scanned and saved on an old website no one had visited in years. He had gone to the kitchen and, together with the chef, had quietly recreated one dish from that old menu, adapted gently to fit Maison's kitchen as an unannounced surprise placed between two regular courses. I don't know if it's allowed, David said. I just thought, do it, Daniel said immediately, without hesitation. That evening, when David brought out the extra dish and explained softly where it came from a restaurant on a street that no longer existed, from a menu from a night 22 years ago, the couple sat in complete silence for a long moment. Then the woman reached across the white tablecloth and took her husband's hand. They did not speak. They did not look at the food. They looked at each other with the particular expression of two people who are suddenly, unexpectedly, back in a room they had forgotten they loved. David came back to the kitchen with his jaw tight, working very hard not to let his face show what was happening inside it. Daniel caught his eye and nodded once. That was the moment Daniel understood the full shape of what the book had been teaching him. Not just the part about the guests, but the other part. The part about what giving truly and unreasonably actually does to the person who gives it. There is a kind of joy that comes only from generosity beyond what is asked, not the joy of receiving something. That is real, but it is quick and fades. The joy of giving something unexpected, something that cost you real time and real attention, something that required you to risk being wrong about what someone needed. That kind of joy goes into the body differently. It stays. It changes the texture of the day. Over time, it changes the shape of the person. His team was changing. He could see it every evening in the way they moved through the dining room. Less mechanical, more alive. They had always been technically excellent. Now they were something harder to name and much harder to achieve. They were present, fully, completely present with every person who walked through the door. Not performing care, actually practicing it. The reviews began to change. Not quickly. This was not a story where transformation comes overnight. It took months. It took 100 small moments. A birthday quietly remembered. A last-minute arrangement of flowers for a guest who had mentioned in passing that her mother used to grow roses. A handwritten card left on a table after a difficult evening, when the team could see that a young man was sitting alone and needed something warm and human before he went back out into the night. But slowly, the language in the reviews began to shift. I mentioned, almost as a joke, that I missed a dish my grandmother used to make when I was a child. I don't know how, but before the end of the evening, something appeared at the table that tasted exactly the way I remembered. I don't know how to explain this, but this restaurant makes me feel as though they had been expecting me specifically. The food is extraordinary, but that is not why I will return. I will return because I have never, in any restaurant in the world, felt so completely at home. I will come back here every year for the rest of my life. And on an evening in late spring, Mia came running through the kitchen door holding her phone. The screen showed a review from the city's most respected food writer, a woman who had given her highest rating only 4 times in 20 years of writing. The review was long. Mia had underlined nothing because she didn't need to. The headline said everything. The restaurant that understands what we are really hungry for. Daniel took the phone, read it carefully all the way through, set it down on the counter. He didn't cheer. He didn't make a speech. He walked out of the kitchen alone, through the swing doors and into the dining room. The last guests were just leaving. Tables were being quietly cleared. The room was warm with the comfortable stillness of a place that had given everything it had that evening and was now simply resting. He stood in the center of it, The same spot where 7 years ago he had stood after closing time and felt absolutely nothing. He thought about Clara, a woman alone on a Tuesday in October pressing a card to her chest. He thought about what it had cost to write those 6 words: a single candle, 2 minutes, a choice. Almost nothing, and what it had opened in her and in him. He thought about the book and the sentence that had puzzled him for years. The sentence he now understood so completely, it felt like something he had always known. Service is a monologue, but hospitality is a conversation. Service says the right thing. Hospitality listens. Service does things correctly. Hospitality asks why this person, on this evening, in this particular moment of their life, came through this door. He thought about David at the kitchen doorway with his jaw tight, trying not to show that giving something to a stranger had moved him more than he expected. This was the whole lesson. Not a strategy, not a technique, not a business philosophy you could put on a slide or teach in an afternoon. Something older than all of those things. Something that had always been true and always would be. The most unreasonable thing a person can do in a restaurant, in a business, in any part of a life is to give someone more than they expect. Not more food, not more efficiency, more humanity, more attention. The full and undefended belief that the person in front of you matters, that their evening matters, their loss matters, their small offhand wish matters, and that you are going to act on that belief, not because anyone is watching, not because it will be rewarded, but simply because you have decided it is true. It is called unreasonable because the world does not require it. It is unreasonable because it costs something every single time. Your energy, the comfortable distance of professionalism. It is unreasonable because most people will never know what went into the moment you quietly created for them. There are no certificates for kindness, no receipts for care, and yet, it is the only thing that people carry home with them. Not the perfect plate, not the flawless execution. The moment they felt seen, the moment someone stopped what they were doing and decided that this one person, with their whole quiet life and their invisible story, were worth the extra mile. That is the whole lesson. That is everything. Daniel tied his apron and went back to work. The restaurant was full that night. Every table, every glass catching the light like something alive. And now, for the first time in 7 years, when Daniel stood in the middle of it all, he felt everything.